Hi, it's Grandma here, and I'm reading The House of 60 Fathers by Mindert de Jong, and we're beginning Chapter 2. To review a little bit of what happened in Chapter 1, the family is escaping the Japanese and have taken a sampan, which is a riverboat, up the river to get away from the Japanese occupation. Meanwhile, they have nothing with them, no money, no food, and the parents went off to an airfield to try to get a job. Meanwhile, their son was left on the boat, and an American serviceman paid him apparently quite a bit of money to ferry him back and forth across the river. But it disappointed his father because his father said he'd lost trust in him. And so that he can't do that again while they are gone, he's taken the oars and he's put the oars at a neighbor's. Chapter 3, Sampan in the River. Early the next morning, Tien Pao again watched his father and his mother and his baby sister strapped to their back clamber through the rain up the long, steep riverbank. Tien Pao stood in the opening of the sampan. "Remember now, you promised. Tomorrow I'm going with you to the great field for airplanes." They did not hear him in the heavy rain. The sky was black with rain. It almost seemed as if the black sky were in the river, and there was no sign of dawn. Tien Pao sighed and shut himself up in the sampan behind the matting in the dreary, clammy dark. He looked wistfully toward the altar and the saucer lamp, but his mother had warned him not to waste oil in the long week before the Americans paid them for their work at the airfield. The little pig was sleeping. The ducklings sat huddled in the bottom of their dry dishpan. Tien Pao lifted out the ducklings and went outside and scooped water outside of the river into the dishpan. Maybe if the ducklings had water, they'd start to swim and whisper their soft little peeps. It was so quiet, and if nothing moved, the long day would never move on. Long before a little daylight came creeping over the river, Tien Pao had dragged out the rice mill and had begun grinding some rice for the baby sister's evening meal. The dreary grinding at the stone mill seemed to make the time pass even slower, but it was something to do. Tien Pao went to fetch another handful of rice. Later, he fetched still another handful. He had to stop himself. If he ground any more, they'd all have to eat baby food for supper. Now there was nothing left to do. Tien Pao was regretfully shoving the rice mill under the bench when a mighty thump sent the sampan crashing into a row of sampans. It knocked Tien Pao flat on his back. One of the ducklings spilled out of the dishpan with a splash of water that went over the side. The little pig jumped high and squealed in alarm. What do you think that could be that could move a big boat like that and knock him over? What could be another boat has hit them. That would be another possibility. We'll find out. Tien Pao scrambled to his feet. There were strange snortings right beside the sampan. Do crocodiles snort? I don't think they do. Water gurgled and bubbled. Again there was a crash. Tien Pao clung to the bench with both hands. The other two ducklings splashed over the side of the new tidal wave in the dishpan. Tien Pao could not imagine what was happening. On hands and knees, he crawled through the rocking boat and pulled the mat out of the doorway. What he saw made him laugh. 5 water buffaloes had come down the bank to wallow in the swollen river. Only their stretched, snorting noses and long, flat horns were above the water. They were playing some kind of stupid cow game, pushing and ramming each other in the water. Now again, a rammed buffalo blundered backward into the sampan. The sampan rocked wildly in the water. They'd knock it loose from its moorings. Tien Pao reached back into the sampan, grabbed the dishpan, just let the water splash. He waited for the first hard, bony rump to get within his reach. Then, yelling like mad, he crashed the empty pan down on a buffalo. The dishpan bonged like a tempo gong. 5 scared buffalo reared up out of the water. They shoved each other out of the river and up the slippery bank with great alarmed snorts. They clambered clumsily. Then the lead buffalo slipped and slid down the bank, bringing the others down. They piled up, heaved themselves to their feet again. Dishpan in hand, Tien Pao stood laughing at this silly sight. He was still chuckling when he went back into the sampan after having once more filled the dishpan with water from the river. He set the ducklings in the dishpan, replaced the mat in the doorway. He did not see that the stake by which the sampan was tied to the bank was lying on top of rain-soaked ground. One of the buffaloes had blundered under the rope, had scraped it over his bony back, and ripped the stake out of the soggy ground. The rope with the stake lay loose on the watery mud. Nothing held the sampan to the bank. Inside the sampan, Tien Pao sat still chuckling. He'd not seen it. Well, this is kind of a foreshadowing as to what's going to happen. They've gone into a lot of detail as to what happened and how dangerous it would be if he was dislodged from the bank. And we'll see if that happens. Tien Pao sat thinking out just how he'd tell the story of the buffaloes to his father and mother when they came home at night. It had been fun. He was almost sorry that he had scared the buffaloes away so soon. Now the long day loomed before him again. Tien Pao sat a while, then he imagined himself hungry. Sure, if he felt a little hungry. It couldn't possibly be noon, but it was something to do. He sat down, took the bowl of cold rice his mother had prepared the day before, and sat down with it on the floor. To make the simple meal last, he invented a game. He took the ducklings out of the dishpan and placed them around his rice bowl. The ducklings immediately began dipping their little flat bills into the rice. The faster Tien Pao dug with his chopsticks, the faster the ducklings pecked and gobbled. It became a race, but the rice was going too fast that way. The meal had to last, and we do have a picture that you can see of him playing his game with the ducklings. Tien Pao had another idea. He tried to feed the ducklings with his chopsticks. He tried each duckling in turn, but it didn't work out too well. And as he was absorbed with the chopsticks, the little pig unexpectedly rushed in and spoiled the whole game. The pig grabbed the lump of rice between the chopsticks and all. Tien Pao had to work to get the chopsticks from between his teeth. Then, when Tien Pao busy bending the chopsticks back into shape, the little pig pushed his snout into the rice bowl and snatched a big, greedy mouthful. In disgust, Tien Pao elbowed the pig away, but there was nothing left in the bowl but a few crumbs. Tien Pao scattered the crumbs on the floor for the ducklings. For punishment, he held the little pig over the crumbs, but just out of reach of the scattered rice. The little pig grunted in disgust and greed. The miserable pig had ended the meal in one blow. Now there was absolutely nothing to do. The ducklings, back in their dishpan, already drifted in their huddled sleep. The pig lay stretched out on the floor, on his side. Tien Pao decided he might as well sleep too. What else was there to do? Using the pig for a pillow, he too stretched out on the floor. He couldn't sleep. At least tomorrow he was going to the great field for airplanes. Tomorrow he'd at last see it too. That thought made him restless and kept him awake. He tried to imagine, from what he'd heard from his father and mother say, just what an airfield would be like. It seemed a bit odd, a big grassy field for airplanes, as if they were horses or grazing goats. Tien Pao laughed too hard at the silly thought. It wasn't that funny. He began pestering the pig, tickling him under his sides, and the little pig could stand no more. With an annoyed squeal, the pig jumped up. Tien Pao's head hit the floor. In revenge for getting his head thumped, Tien Pao made a wild grab for the pig's hind leg. The little pig squealed wildly, managed to jerk away. He raced through the sampan. Now he seemed to want Tien Pao to chase him. He must be bored too, but Tien Pao made believe he was sound asleep. At last, the impatient little pig edged back to Tien Pao, nudged him with his snout. Tien Pao reared up and let out such a crazy yell that the startled little animal almost fell over backward. A wild game began. They raced around the narrow sampan, Tien Pao yelling, the little pig squealing. The sampan rocked on the water with the commotion. It rocked. It inched forward, slid a little bit away from the bank. The galloping, yelling game went on inside the sampan, and the sampan pulled from under its gangplank. The plank fell on the water with a hard, flat slap, but the yelling Tien Pao did not hear. At last the little pig could run no more. His sides heaved, his head, his mouth wide open for breath. He threw himself down and lay where he fell. Tien Pao himself lay down, panting. He had to rest for a while. Under the drumming of the rain on the matting, there was yet another sound. There was not another sound anywhere. In all the sampans, people seemed to have gone to sleep in the long, dull, rainy afternoon. So Tien Pao also fell asleep. Quietly, the shore end of the gangplank loosed itself from the slippery mud underneath the riverbank as the swollen river rose, still higher with the rain. The plank scraped along the sampan. It edged out into the river, shot away as a river current caught it. Almost as if the sampan had seen its gangplank race away and wanted to go after it, the sampan, too, loosed itself in the watery mud at the river's edge. First it drifted slowly it twirled. Slowly and quietly it edged along the row of sampans with a rope and stake dangling behind it. Then, like the plank, it was grabbed by the current. It shot away. It was swifter than the plank. It swept under a high-arched bridge. Under the bridge, it passed a swiftly riding plank. An old man under a silk umbrella stepped into the bridge. In the rain darkness, he saw a lone sampan sweeping away downriver, and that's the one Tien Pao is in. But the wind over the high bridge caught his umbrella. He pulled it down in front of his face and shuffled across the long bridge. When he looked again at the far end of the bridge, the sampan had disappeared. The old man looked at the racing river. He muttered to himself. So Tien Pao is in a very precarious position and he doesn't even know it. His sampan is shooting down the river toward the Japanese, and his father has taken the oars. So what do you think is going to happen next? How's he going to react when he realizes that he is adrift on the river going downstream? Well, we'll find out the next time we read. Bye-bye.